Welcome to We Hear Her. I am Erin Trenbeth Murray.
And I am Jennifer Bean.
We're here today with another amazing woman who's sharing her story and insights to lessons learned. Hi there, I'm Erin Trenbeth Murray, and I am so happy to be here with Sherer today, who is one of our amazing women who succeed and oversees all of HR at the University of Utah Health Hospitals and Clinics. So, Sarah, first of all, thank you for being here, and I'm going to tell our group a little bit about you. And as we ask for every lady to provide their bio, I was struck how humble Sarah is, because she has the most demanding job that I cannot even begin to imagine in this time of crisis with COVID. But in general, it would be a huge job. So she is the Chief Human Resources Officer, as I mentioned, at University of Utah Health, where she works with her human resources team to focus on people-first strategies, which is so true, as I have watched being on the University of Utah Hospital Board, how important it is that the staff and people are first. The HR division supports over 13,000 employees and works diligently to foster an environment of respect, inclusion, strategic collaboration, and innovation. She is passionate about building relationships that help move the mission of top quality care for patients forward, while empowering others to be intentional and to create an environment for safety. She lives in Salt Lake City with her husband and her daughter and loves to travel, be outside, and enjoy the amazing Wasatch Mountains. And one of the things that I want to start off with is that Sarah did not share, is I know that her leadership and her team were just recently recognized in Utah Business Magazine, and I'd love for you to share, first of all, a little bit about that recognition.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was very humbling. And again, it's a team recognition. So amazing that the team was able to pull together, especially during this time of COVID, and it was the HR Achievement Award. Mm-hmm. And again, it's never a single person, and the team has just come to, as you mentioned, like the people first strategies. How do we take care of our team? And really just highlighting the great work. And I think one of the best things is HR has really been at the table in many organizations, especially this past year, because people are what matters. And I think we're seeing that in our workforce and trending, and not just in healthcare industry, but in all industries. And so I was actually appointed to the role April of 2020. So right, in a very boring time. And so just to have the team come together and just the accomplishments that they've done and what we've been able to create and innovate and then support has been tremendous. So that was a huge, just a win for the whole team.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
So well deserved. I mean, I can't wait to dive into this interview and learn more from you about your leadership strategies and how you approach it. You have such an enormous role, just the magnitude of people and the tremendous pressures that I don't think any of us that are outside of healthcare can remotely imagine. And you kept speaking humbly of putting people first. How do you put yourself first?
That's a really good question, Erin. And I think a lot of us, especially as we're achieving and we want to take care of others, is I think we do neglect ourselves, and I'm trying to do better. So when you say put myself first, it's important, I think, as we're seeing, especially with mental health and what we've gone through this past 20 months, is we have to do self-care. Like, we have to be able to carve out time, and we have so many roles. And I think, especially as women, as I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a leader, I'm a colleague. But I've noticed, and a really good lesson I think in life is, if you're not taking care of yourself, you really can't take care of others. Mm-hmm. And so it's baby steps. So how I take care of myself is I have really been working hard on at least setting aside an hour in the week, because there's that guilt, and not allowing the guilt to seep in, because it's like, well, if I'm spending an hour for myself, I'm not with my daughter and I don't get to see her all the time. But then I realize, if I'm burned out, or if I don't have that rest, I'm no good to her. I'm no good to my husband. I'm no good to those that I want to serve in our organization. And so it's little things. It's taking a walk. It's listening to a podcast. It's getting a massage. So those are things that I'm trying to do better, because I think if you talk about it but you don't model it, it's really hard for other people to kind of join in on that. So
sure, just like the the leader who tells people, I don't want you to work weekends or nights or this, and then, but you're role modeling and that you're there till 10 o'clock at night or you're shooting off emails at 2 in the morning.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you actually brought that up. I will say that's my ownership too. 'Cause I'm a huge proponent of work-life balance, and also I think it's flexibility and adaptability. And I think where we've seen the world and where we're going, I'm so excited. But everything you said is true. Like as leaders, you can be a huge proponent of that. But if you are sending late night emails, it does not help your team because the words aren't matching your actions, and that's super detrimental to a team and culture. And then I tell people, there's all these really great tricks. You can do a delay send on Outlook because sometimes you need to do it. Like as you mentioned, like self-care, if you need to do that for your own mental health, but don't burden others with your quick moment.
Yes.
And so, so thank you for bringing that up because that's another one. This might be the journey of Sarah in this interview. Like, what is Sarah working on?
What is she working on? Well, okay, so I've learned one little trick from that is that I have to also stagger it because if I do happen to be working on the weekend, I kept setting them for 7 a.m. Monday morning, and then everybody's inboxes got slammed at exactly 7 a.m. and then it still sent the message, oh, she's working all weekend. So I'm like, okay, I got to do 7, 7:30, 7:45, 8, 8:50.
Or they're talking and they're like, wow, how did she send all these at the exact same time?
Yeah. So we do. It is, I mean, at times leadership does require it is extra, and there's ebbs and flows, right? Then you also have some flexibility to be like, I need to go on a walk this morning and I'm not heading into the office for a bit because I've got to clear my head, and I love that piece of grabbing whatever you can for self-care. How old's your daughter?
She's 8.
Oh, so what a fun age.
Yeah, super fun. She's quick, and so it's been keeping me on my toes. I just learned today that the 90s is the oldie days. So, because I asked about these Doc Martens, and she said that's oldie time. And I'm like, what?
Oldie time.
So the 90s now for everybody is oldie time.
Well, that's so funny because my sons are 18 and 22, and they are so jealous that I grew up in the 80s, that my high school years were in the late 80s, and they're like, was it really like Ferris Bueller? And I'm like, kind of. Yep, actually a little bit.
Everything was a John Hughes film. It's great.
They're like, we love it. We wish we lived in the 80s. So, well, tell me a little bit about, as your daughter, she's 8 and going to be moving into pre-adolescence and adolescence, like what kinds of things are you hoping that you're able to convey to her about growing into a young woman and into a woman? What are some top big nuggets that you're hoping you're passing on?
Well, and it's so interesting too, right? Because I think there's so much difference in technology than when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think for her, there's a lot of pressures that I think young women will face, because we just have a lot more at us. So social media is different. I mean, I didn't even have a cell phone until I was in college. And now I've got an 8-year-old who's asking me, when does she get hers?
Yeah.
And I'm like, not for a long time. And so, but I think for her, it's, having your confidence and knowing who you are. Because I think we all face that. It doesn't matter what generation we've grown up in, is that confidence of who we are and knowing, it's okay. Like, you're not going to make everybody happy, but you need to be true to yourself. And you're going to make mistakes, and it's how you deal with those mistakes. And, and I've got your back. And it might seem that way. And I think as parents, we always want to fix things. But I think anymore, as I'm on this journey, it's just being there and allowing a safe space. So I'm hoping it'll be a long journey, but it's, that she can come to us, and it's better to talk with us because we're there to really support her through it. And I think there's a lot of fear and disappointment, and it's like, no, like, you do your best, and that's all I expect. And be kind to others and how you treat, because your integrity is what's the most important. And please don't overshare, because once you throw something on the internet, it is always there forever.
It's there. It is there.
And we all don't care about what makeup you're choosing today. So.
Right. Well, tell me some more about your current role and what you love in your role, and what has been, I mean, it's kind of cliche for me to ask, like, what's the biggest challenge of the HR director of a healthcare system in the year 2021? But I'd love to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when people ask me, like, what's a typical day like? And I'm like, actually, a typical day is I have no idea what the day is going to look like. That is the one thing I know is steadfast. And, I think there's that support. So I think, people a lot of times think of, employment, or if you're going through employee relations, so if there's ever like corrective action, and those are the foundation pieces. But I think what people maybe are unaware what HR does is there's a lot of recommendation and counseling. There's that guidance. There's the strategic forethought of how do we anticipate the needs of our staff? How do we basically provide resources for people to grow. So not just at leadership level, but how do we move our teams into opportunities? And I think sometimes we kind of think of just a linear path upwards, but that's not always the case. So it's like, how do we get creative? How do we reduce barriers to entry? I think that's been the best thing that I've loved, especially recently, is we don't have to always do the way things have always been. And whether that's remote work, I think I've always been like so excited. I was like, don't waste a pandemic, because I think people were so hesitant. And one of the greatest things I've seen is you can't require working from home and now make it a privilege. Like, we were able to demonstrate that there's a lot of success.
Yeah.
And so how do you leverage that? And especially like in a clinical model, is it's a balance. So we have our non-clinical support that can do that, but then how does that foster and support our clinical partners? And there's a lot of great things that come out of those things. So I think in HR, and what gets me excited is the constant innovation, thinking outside the box, and making our lives better for our teams so that they can focus on what they do well. And bringing back that balanced approach to work and life, and how we do it.
So what do you think? Tell me a little bit about your experiences or your life lessons as a leader.
Yeah. So I think we get so many, and I've really loved, and people who know me, I love humor, and if you can't laugh at yourself, like, life is going to be really long and really hard. Really long and really hard. And so when I was in college, I actually volunteered. I was kind of like a camp counselor. It was a week camp, and it was to support people who had different levels of blindness, so completely blind or just partially, and all ages. So I think it was like 6 to 82.
Wow.
And it was a fun camp, because what we got to do is we did like roller skating and swimming and bicycling and rock climbing. And so you were basically paired up with someone so that you could assist, and they could do these really great events and fun things. And so I'll never forget, we were at the swimming pool, and so we were helping everybody get changed and ready to go, and the light went out. And I'm kind of a take charge, and I want people to be safe. And so I was like, nobody panic. Follow the sound of my voice. And I have a great friend, and she like leans over, and she's like, so Sarah, this is how it normally is for everybody. And that stuck with me, because I was like, yeah, true.
Yeah.
But I think the lesson I really took away from that is, in leadership, we can think that we're doing the right things, and we've got everyone's greatest intention. But if we don't connect with what's really going on, we're in the dark. So I thought I was doing this great thing and helping people. I probably caused more panic, because they didn't know that there was something actually going on. And so as a leader, I think that's what I've learned is, really listening and connecting and understanding where people are at, because everybody's at different levels, right? So some people, are newer in their careers and need a little more guidance or mentorship, and some have been great and seasoned. But so it's like, how do you challenge, and how do you give purpose in doing that component? And so that always stuck with me, is like pausing and actually understanding my surroundings before I just go and take charge.
I love that. But you are a take charge kind of lady. So you gotta just, yeah.
And then I get these great stories and be like, let me tell you about when I have this opportunity to learn. So,
well, tell me, so from a personal perspective, like, as I think of my years in leadership, I get sometimes so tunnel vision about either what needs to be accomplished, the metrics that needs to get met, the goal at hand, and I can get swept away in that element and forget about the human element and the person that is helping to carry out the work, or that is part of the team. And I know a lot of women in our group, obviously the purpose is to grow confidence and leadership in girls and young women. So the women in our group, whether they're a CEO, an executive, a leader in their community, in their church, in their school, whatever, we're all taking some type of leadership roles. What advice would you give of how you keep the human element present, that you stay empathetic, that you're aware of what's going on while you're still accomplishing the tasks that need to get done?
Yeah, because it's important. I mean, I think people who really know me, I'm also very data driven. And I think the reason why you need both sides is because everything you mentioned, if you're running a business, or if you have to have outcomes you need to report on, you've got to have substantial evidence. So it's that quantitative and qualitative. But at the end of the day, though, is people are humans, and everybody's different, and so you have to be able to connect and let them understand their individual contribution. Let those people that are working on it understand the outcomes and the why.
Why.
And the why is a hard thing. And I've talked about this for many years with leaders, is Sometimes, and I get it, we're all there. It's like, ugh, it just takes time. It takes time to have to discuss the why and explain it.
Mm,
But the issue is, and I always kind of say, is people really aren't asking why to be defiant or to challenge you as a leader. A lot of times it's just so that they can understand how they can contribute and what they're doing is actually adding value. And so when you kind of have that side of the human side of like, people, I think for the most part, want to be successful and want to help whatever work they're doing help the greater good. I think that's a kind of a core. Not everybody, but for the most part, right? And so when we have that ability to be able to show like, here's the metrics and how we're going, and if we, if they're not going the direction we want, explaining like how do we get there and what are some opportunities, I think you find a lot more value added into people that want to be part of that. And so I think with, and it has been hard. I think even through this pandemic, we look at data a lot and it's been very unpredictable. And you do have to keep that human first because people are tired, people are burned out. What I've loved the most during this time is, I'm always trying to find joy, is that we've really put a highlight on mental health.
yeah.
And we talk about it and we're normalizing it. And it's
Yes.
okay. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, you can be upset, you can be mad, angry, like, I'm exhausted, we're all exhausted. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't recognize it, how are we ever going to get through this together? And so I think that's part of what I have seen change in leadership and hopefully in organizations is now the human side is becoming a lot more apparent and we have to focus on it.
Yes, yes. I was just thinking when you said that something funny. I watched The Voice last night, one of my favorites, and Ariana Grande was trying to decide between two singers. And she just naturally came right out and said, I talked to my therapist about this because this has really been weighing on me. And it was just so matter of fact.
Yeah.
Ariana Grande's talking to a therapist as everyone else is. And,
Yeah.
keeping that mental health as part of the normalcy that you spoke of, that this has been an um, incredibly difficult time for many people. I have found a lot of joy with my reconnecting with nature and with my family. But the pressures. I'm wondering, do you feel, and your daughter being 8, was she was home for most of it?
She was. And,
Uh-huh.
and then you kind of get through like where families had to make really hard decisions. And so
Yeah.
she was home and she's an only child.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband is a clinical nurse. And really, we had to make the decision. So he actually had to reduce his hours. So that was a super hard choice where it's being
Right.
able to support the community and provide that skill set, but also with my job and having that piece. But yeah, so she did. She's in public school, and so she was definitely home for that year, and it was hard. It was very lonely. I think she also thought she was an equal share member in the family because she wanted to vote.
There's 3 of us.
Yeah,
And I'm
she's like,
here all
"Where's
the
my
time.
third?" And
Right.
so I think there's that. And I'll never forget. It was in February. She looked at me and my husband, and she was like, "I am so sick of you two." And I was like, but I think it was important because there was that piece where, and we were lucky enough to find kind of a group of other parents who had only children where we could go outside like in January, February, and the kids could play and they would wear their masks, but they were outside because it was lonely.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then my husband, I mean, that was a huge, he wasn't a teacher. So, I mean, having to try to do online school and the kids too, I think what we forgot about is when March hit, those kids didn't get to say goodbye to their friends. It was very much
Right.
bye.
It was like a week. We're going to be
Yeah.
closing down for a week or so, and
In
then
that way.
I remember a neighbor telling me, "Oh, they'll just be off for a week." And I looked.
No.
I was at the Red Cross at that time, and we were watching as the health side of it, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh no, we are gonna, this is going to be a big thing."
But I think, but like as you meant, but like we were talking about though, is what we made sure during that time is we really did talk about our feelings a lot, and we
Yeah.
wanted to express it because, and hopefully those lessons she can carry with her.
Oh yeah, that year I spent with Dad
Yeah,
at home,
yeah,
and
and my husband was like, he's like, that was actually kind of a great time because you don't always get that. But I know so many other families that it was very detrimental
Right.
and hard because they couldn't go to work, and so it was trying to balance. So as an employer and a leader, it was like, how do we help our teams? How do we get through this and help our clinical providers and care for that? So I don't know. It was a wild, I don't know. I think we're going to look back on this and there's a lot of lessons we've been able to glean and will continue to. But yeah, it was.
All those families of the employees, and the circumstances where people would come to you. Can you think of an example? When has there been a difficult situation that you've had to rise above as a leader? How did you manage that specific challenge?
Yeah, I think the workforce challenge we're in currently is one that it's a constant
Yeah.
daily, because our clinical caregivers are very tired, rightly
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And there's just the labor movement across the country, and you've got travelers, and so people are making lucrative amounts of money, and so it's
Mhm.
balancing this. But also, I mean, we've got team members that are just tired of doing the clinical
So
care.
what do you do to
Yeah,
lift
I mean,
them?
so I think a lot of it is I do focus a lot on culture, and I
Yeah.
mean, in compensation. So we have compensation plans, and we work very hard as a leadership team. Like, how do we remedy that? But that's one. That's just one component. And so it for me is, people stay in their positions as well as when you have a really great boss and a leader. And we actually had a good example of that. Someone said, hey, I was offered more to go somewhere else, but I really love my boss. And so, and I tell people, don't underestimate the
Right.
engagement factor you have with your team, because when you support them, that stays. So culture actually has been kind of where we've kind of had to look at, and back to that people first is dedication to the workforce. That's been our number one mantra the entire time. Um, and I think that does pay off in a sense. Now, not everybody, because I mean, there's people who have to make choices, and it's super hard, and it crushes me. I think when people, you get the feedback, and it's like the leaders don't care, and I've had to be like, you can't take that personally, but I kind of do. That's just my style, and it's like I wish I could tell people, I do stay up and I haven't slept in months and months because I do feel bad. Like, I want employees to know their value, and if they're feeling that way, it does hurt, and the team does come together, and we talk about this on the daily. But I think it's, again, it's you just have to keep steadfast focus and try to support people where you can, and you can't make everyone happy,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean you can't try to keep where you need to be and keep your culture alive.
What a great role model you are for your daughter.
We'll hope. She probably would disagree with you,
Oh,
but
she won't. When she gets older, and and other, not the entire, certainly the entire population, but for especially, I bet, for the women that get to work around you and watch, just listening to you talk, what I really enjoyed listening to is there's this hard business mind that's analytical, and the non-negotiables that I hear coming through. And then I hear this incredible empathy and reality check of these human beings who are doing the best they can, and you want to support them no matter what, and you will give all that you can to make them successful. I just love it. I
thank you for
just,
your kind words.
so neat, so neat. If you could give the girls and young women of our group, as well as the
Yeah.
women in our group, this will go out. How can you share with them like some advice or guidance as they're moving in from being a young woman into women that will be leaders?
Yeah.
What kind of a guidance or advice could you give them?
I would say to really look in, and your integrity is super important, and don't let anyone ever challenge that. So, I mean, in my career, I think about things where people kind of say, well, can't you just do this? And I've always said my integrity is the most important thing, and I can leave, because for me, that's what's important, because it's figuring out what's that core center that drives you. I think too, you're going to face challenges where you may feel minimized, but when you know who you are, find a good circle of mentors,
Mm-hmm.
um, of backgrounds different from your own. I think that's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing. And if you can also find a really good counterpart that is not like you, that will actually help you grow even more, because it'll give you a different vantage point. When you have a lot of people that are very similar minded, I think that's why we strive for diversity, right? That's why we
Right.
want different viewpoints, different lived experiences, because you want to be challenged and to not get discouraged, because you will be challenged. You're not always going to succeed, but just keep going. And then at the end of the day, one of my mentors, sorry, Mike, she just said, be kind. This is her 5th anniversary of passing. And so, yeah, so she just was awesome. And she said, be kind. And that's really important.
I love that you're carrying her
Yeah.
spirit with you. And I think a few minutes ago when we were talking, one of the words that kept resonating in my mind was be kind, that you're messaging at the very beginning of this interview. Out of everything you've said, you said be kind at the very beginning, and that just kept coming back to me. And then to hear you say that right now
Yeah.
just makes my heart fill with joy that you're getting positive vibes, and that able to share something that you learned from someone you loved and a mentor with so many other young women.
Yeah.
So
Be kind to each other, right? I think women, we compete a lot. So we're all on the same team. If we're just a little kinder with each other,
If we
could
would
do amazing things.
we
actually.
could run this world if we could just do that together. Oh, well, Sarah, it was such a pleasure. You're making me tear up.
I know, sorry.
It's okay. It's been such a pleasure to get to talk with you today and hear some insights. I could sit all day with you, and I actually would love to go to lunch with you again, or go to lunch and go through this conversation again, because I really think you're just such a stellar, amazing example to the women in Utah, and I'm so pleased that you would give us some time this morning.
No, I love it, and again, I'm amazed at you. I mean, we have so much potential in this state. We are going to do great things.
We're going to do great things. So thank you again, and we look forward to our next podcast.
Thank you for taking time to hear her. Join our efforts and learn more at womenwhosucceed.org. A big thank you to our sponsor, the Clark and Christine Ivory Foundation.